Welcome to Data, Pharma, and Fika. My name is Karl Rahn. Today, we have a very special guest. His name is Dr. Eric Daimler. Dr. Daimler is an expert in the field of robotics and artificial intelligence with over 20 years of experience as an entrepreneur, an investor, and a policymaker. Dr. Eric Daimler has co-founded 6 technology companies. He is currently the CEO of Connexus AI, a company spun out of MIT. Thank you for coming to talk with us today. We're very excited to talk with you and learn a little bit more about your past and what's important to you. And you've led a very interesting life. We'd like to get into AI and your expertise around machine learning and artificial intelligence. And it's such a hot topic, and I've read and seen it described so many ways. And some ways are fearful, which are odd. Some are very, very hopeful, which I tend to agree with, or at least I hope for, that artificial intelligence will enable us to understand maybe some of the blind spots that we don't see right now, that just aren't within our ability to understand. And I was thinking what to ask you around this, and where do you think AI will be most impactful in, say, 5 or 10 years?
Wow, yeah, there's a lot to unpack around the subject of AI. I often have thought what's accurate versus what's useful in talking about AI. Most people, they're just not served by getting to the level of precision that makes sense for an AI researcher. There's some books have come out saying, well, AI is just augmentation. That's true. It's just automation. That's true. It's just statistics. That's true, but definitively not useful. What I find for the 99% of us that are not AI researchers is this context, which is that AI is something that can sense data, collects data, and those sensors could be from anywhere. Think the Internet of Things, think the LiDAR on top of your automated car, something that then plans, something that thinks, cognates, what have you, and then something that executes on that plan. It's really distinct from the planning, distinct from the sensing. So something that senses, plans, acts on the result, and then learns from the experience, which is different than your 1990s era thermostat in your home. Senses, plans, acts, learns from the experience. That really gets to the essence of the meaning that can begin to allow people to have a conversation about what it is and how it's going to play into our lives. If you're going to get precise, you'd say that, well, AI is a particular type of learning algorithm, a subset of which is machine learning, a subset of which is deep learning. Therefore, there are also non-machine learning AIs. But that level of specificity is just, it's less helpful for most of us, even other researchers, but those of us that are not AI researchers.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's a great overview. So there's so many things we hear about in terms of impact of things that are coming. So, for example, self-driving cars, you referred to, some aspects around that and artificial intelligence and how that will roll out. Where do you see, what do you think the first thing is that the general public say, that we're going to say, oh man, that's AI, holy smokes?
Well, when I grew up with AI, and I've been doing this sort of work for 20 plus years, we used to say that AI was just those things that were in research. And once they become practical, they were no longer AI. The term has morphed somewhat into this sort of everyday part of our discourse. There's even an AI office in the White House now that we started with AI initiatives when I was there, but now has its own formal director. That means this is something totally different. And of course, the name is silly because it's kind of neither. The timing under which this technology expresses itself is a real easy thing to get wrong. Even the people back in 1964, I think it was, or Dartmouth, where the term was invented, I had a different concept of how quickly they would bring these innovations into reality. They thought it would take a summer, as the mythology goes.
Yeah.
And in Silicon Valley, where I live, we often talk about confusing a clear vision with a short time horizon. So I don't want to be caught in doing that sort of thing.
Yeah.
We can talk about what's going to come, maybe the order of which the things come, how they might express themselves, but the timing is a separate question.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, very, very interesting. And I wanted to get into your time working for the Obama administration. Absolutely, but we'll save that for a little bit later in the discussion, I think, because we're very interested to hear about your experiences there. So your background in computer science and mathematics, how do you feel those disciplines impacted your career in AI? Did they impact it differently, or is this just the sum of what makes you up, that you're a computer scientist and a mathematician? Or could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, what my experience and what I was always told by my academic advisors is that the further you got in computer science, the more it looked like math. If you looked at the people that won programming competitions over the last 10 or 20 years, those actually didn't come from the elite universities in computer science. Those were people that could code really, really well. But if you saw some of the elite computer scientists at the schools that I had the privilege of attending, the arguments were about math. The arguments in the hallways were about math. That's really what's foundational. And what's exciting is that's changed over the past decades. When I was studying, we had discrete math. Before my time, we had relational algebra. And that sort of math was required to enable then commercial expressions, such as relational databases. Relational databases, which are everywhere now, would not exist if it were not for relational algebra. Today, there's a new domain of math, category theory, and that's really going to wipe the slate clean with information technology infrastructure over the next 10 to 20 years. It's going to make everything else we do today look like we're speaking Latin.
Oh, wow. And how so?
Well, the math of calculus, trigonometry, geometry, those are really useful, but in a particular domain, mechanics, aerospace, they're the math of continuity. But in a digital realm, calculus isn't quite as useful. We need a math that's more appropriate for the age in which we live. And category theory is that math. It's a sort of meta mathematics is how it was invented. You can think of it, it's not quite true, but you can think of it as an extension of graph theory, which is a sort of math of relationships, which is what my PhD was in. It's allowing for all meaning to be transferred from domain to domain with a guaranteed integrity. And so the fascinating issue about category theory as it applies to biology is, from what I've been told from pharmaceutical researchers, is that category theory may very well be the math that allows for the modeling of biology. Which sounds as a strange statement to my ears when I first heard it, but then as it was explained, I know the math, I don't know the biology, but I do know the difference between me and rocks. And so rocks have certain properties. I, Eric, have certain properties, but I, Eric, am not defined by my properties. I am, unlike rocks, I am defined by the relationships of those properties. It's not actually all that interesting to look at one gene at a time for me. It's more interesting to look at those relationships. That is fundamental to the nature of category theory, of the math. So that's what inspires some of these researchers to say that category theory could be the math that models biology. It's just a fascinatingly powerful path, a domain to explore. Another thing that I can say is that this is a misconception that people may have about the world in which we live is around big data. Big data is kind of an old term right now. It's been around for a decade or so. And it's faded because the data has gotten so large. Big data says 90% of all data that we're experiencing was created in the last 2 years, and that's true. What is little known is that the number of data sources has also increased at that rate. And so those data sources could be from Internet of Things or sensors or clinical data, the number of academic papers published and so forth, number of data sources. So if you have the number of data sources growing at the same rate as the amount of data, then what then becomes useful is data relationships.
Makes sense.
And so that's the future. That's the future, is data relationships and the management of data relationships. People often say companies are going to be just data companies. I'm going to say they're actually going to be data relationships companies. That's the more helpful paradigm.
Interesting. Yeah, an interesting way to look at it. It's an exponent. That's almost beyond exponential growth. Yeah.
It's like solid to liquid to gas. It's a phase change when you go from billions to trillions. You need a meta level framework.
Yeah, excellent. Wow, thanks for sharing that. Well, let's change gears a little bit and talk about something that's a little more topical and in the news, and that's government regulation and what's going on with companies like Facebook and other social media companies that are creating, machine learning. Maybe it's partly artificial intelligence, and as far as what their goals are in terms of increasing their user base or increasing revenue, whatever they're trying to do. Could you talk a little bit about that?
There's a few ways in which these algorithms are going to have to be regulated, there's a few ways in which we're going to have to think about these structures and how to regulate them. I think it's inevitable that regulation will come in some form. I think that there's a few buckets in which to be having this discussion. The first is making sure that we just remember these are automation systems. And that's helpful for the second point, which is the linking of automation systems. We want to make sure that we're clear that these discrete automation systems are linked in the way we want them to be linked as a society. We want some input about my payments to affect my credit, but I shouldn't just see some outcome at the very end that says, these are the list of houses you could have. I want an intermediate step, right?
Yeah.
So that's a linking of automation. That's one way of thinking about it. The second way is we need to ultimately separate the algorithm, that is the data model, from the data. There's a lot of discussion right now about data privacy, which is fine, bias in data, which is fine, but it's really much more helpful to separate that sort of data discussion from the data model that manipulates that data. An example is a frequent flyer program. So I fly Delta Airlines, and Delta, they know how often I fly, they know how much I pay for tickets. That's part of the data model, those sort of variables. And then you have the data that they collect about me, my height, my eye color, what have you. You separate out what we want to have shared with others, and then how they actually manipulate it. These data models, in many, many cases, will need to become transparent. These data models will need to become exposed to the world. We do this right now with food ingredients. We have listings of what's in food, right? We're fine with that. We have nutritional profiles. Some amount of exposure is going to have to be made. And then there's the third bucket of where to think of regulation. So the first is just reminding ourselves that this is automation, linked automation. The second is separating data models from the data. And then the third, and this may be the place that most of these systems find themselves, is in what's called zero knowledge proofs. The zero knowledge proofs means that I can ask questions, I can get answers, but I actually am not exposing the underlying mechanics, the black box, if you will. we do this right now as a society with things like credit. So in comes my name and my government ID number, out comes the degree to which I can afford a house.
Mm-hmm.
We're fine with that. So those companies don't really expose their inside data model. They just expose their zero knowledge proof. They expose the ability to ask questions and get answers. So those are the three ways in which we're going to have to frame this debate about regulation. We're going to have to get quite specific and in some cases quite technical.
Yeah, very interesting. So do you see this transparency coming organically from these corporations, or do you think they're going to have to be pushed?
Oh, I think they're going to have to be pushed because even some very well-meaning executives, many of whom are my friends, they may have been trained as scientists as I have, but their incentives are as business people. So they may try to be well-meaning, but their incentives are not aligned with necessarily opening up to the broader public. Something I learned being in government that really was continuously startling was the degree to which governments cannot choose their constituency. We in government could not say, oh, well, I satisfied 70% of the population. We're good. A business, that's completely reasonable. 80%, you'd think you're doing fantastic. But as a government, that's not that you can't do that. You have to be able to satisfy the 100% of your population, of course.
Well, that will lead into my next question. Hey, talk to us about your impressions of working with Barack Obama and the Obama administration and being what was your fit? Were you a consultant, or were you, talk to us about that experience.
I had the great privilege of serving there during the administration and being inside the security gate of the White House. And I believe, or it resonates with me, what the president had said at the time, which is that if you don't get goosebumps, if you don't feel something special every time you walk through that door, then you're in the wrong job. Wow. And that's how I felt. It was as special as you think it is. Air Force One was as cool as you think it is. It was as cool as you think, and the president was as cool as you think. I have to say I was super impressed with the people with whom I worked. There was a real sense of duty and a real sense that we could be making a difference. There is who the president is or was, what he stood for as the first African American president. And then there was his policies. I could say that the example he set and the vision permeated the administration. In my experience, it was a wonderful place to be, serving the population in that way. And I hope I get a chance to do it again.
It's wonderful to hear. So what were you tasked with coming in there? Yeah. I mean, I'd love to hear the overall tone. It's just so good to hear. I was a big fan of Barack Obama. He's super cool. And so what exactly, I mean, tell us, what were you tasked with? Was there a specific problem that you said, hey, let's look at this, or I need to know about this, or we need to create policy around this? What was going on?
Well, so it's helpful to know that the White House, at least in the the American government, it doesn't have a budget. The rest of the executive branch has the budget. What the White House has is convening authority. We can bring a group together. So the idea is you speak humbly on behalf of the president on the priorities around these new technologies, and along with some really terrific colleagues, who had expertise in other things from space to soil. We had a convening in the White House about soil erosion. Believe it or not, it was some ridiculous amount, like 2 tons of soil, leaves the continent every year from erosion. I may have those numbers wrong, but it was enough to convene a meeting. we convene a meeting around AI, and you speak humbly on behalf of the president on what are the priorities, especially around research. And those might be different between the Defense Department, State Department, and Health and Human Services, for example, and all the rest. And so we had a big group, and even the definitions of AI and robotics might vary between them. So I was providing my expertise in AI. There were others, notable others in computer security, or specifically just in analytics, but mine was in AI and robotics.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Ah, great. Is there anything, and this is kind of a broad question, that you feel the public really doesn't understand about AI? What is something that everybody kind of gets wrong?
Well, the big issue I want to communicate is that AI's expression as a utopia or a dystopia is going to be determined through our involvement. We can't just wait for our hopes to be fulfilled or Hollywood's narration of our fears to be expressed.
Even though it's kind of fun.
There was a rug in the Oval Office that had a quote inscribed on it. It was credited to Martin Luther King, saying something to the effect of, the long arc of history bends towards justice, but as the president reminded us, not without our involvement. It doesn't accidentally get there. It doesn't get there just by momentum. I want to apply that to AI. So AI, machine learning, or all of our digital experiences, they can be life-changing, life-improving, life-saving, quite literally. These can facilitate the introduction of drugs and the speed with which we're able to introduce them, and the efficacy, the customization, of course, is where everybody is going. But that doesn't happen just by accident. That happens with a concert of individuals. That happens in collaboration, where we understand enough that we're not scared of it, and that we help determine how we want this expression to be shaped in our everyday lives. That's the biggest issue, is I need people to be part of the conversation about what they want, so that they ultimately can embrace what they want.
Yeah, it's a very positive outlook. I like it. It's definitely the hopeful future for AI. And I think a collaborative one is just, it's wonderful to hear you talk about it like this. Tell us a little bit about your work with Connexus AI. Just tell us a little bit about it. I'm super interested. Found it out at MIT, and tell us a little bit more.
This really started from my time working in the US federal government. From having that perspective of AI at a really big level, I began to realize where people are going to, where they are running up against the barriers in implementing AI, in fulfilling their potential. There's a lot of disappointments in governments, in large organizations, and its citizens in what AI is expressing in the world right now. Our firm is looking to address that fundamental problem at the level of math that changes how AI's promise can be fulfilled. What we do is we take this new branch of mathematics, category theory, and we apply that at the basic level, the foundational level, the infrastructure level, to make sure that the information that organizations, governments, companies already collect is useful, and the meaning that it is ascribed is guaranteed to be maintained. That's really useful in ways that don't come necessarily intuitively. We worked with some pharmaceutical companies in the United States that wanted to make sure that over the course of a decade-long phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 drug trial, that data isn't misinterpreted. That's a big deal, because hundreds of people can be involved in an organization, to say nothing of the number of patients. the meaning needs to be maintained in order for people to get comfortable that their conclusions are accurate. These are obviously life and death contexts, so that
Yes.
this matters. The consequences matter. The chemists with whom we work, they talked about making sure that H2O means H2O. If it means O2H, bad things can happen.
Mm.
That expresses itself in a wide range of applications in the pharmaceutical industry, and that's what we're working to address. That has implications in logistics, in energy efficiency, in transportation, and in national security. It's really mind-boggling because it's at the level of math. I can say more about this, but it's really quite a transformational discovery in math.
Yeah, the importance of data integrity is crucial to many businesses, but clinical research and study, absolutely. So we at Captario aid big pharma and small pharma in asset management and profile management. It's our core business, helping corporations through analysis of their decision-making processes. So yeah, we understand. We're talking the same language now, I think. So that's good to hear. All right, so let's have some fun, okay? Not that this hasn't been fun so far, but I'm going to throw out some names and some things, and give me 20 seconds on each one. You up for it?
Let's go.
Okay. Elon Musk.
Anybody that says they could have predicted Elon's ultimate trajectory is fooling themselves. He was definitely unusual even back then, but his original mapping company, Zip2, didn't appear at the time to be anything special. He then started this company X.com, which looked like it was on the verge of bankruptcy and was saved by its merger into PayPal.
Wow.
Where at the time it almost looked like two drunks holding each other up, and they created something of it. Good for them. A lot of people would like to say that they saw that coming.
No way.
Okay.
Okay. Boston Robotics.
There is. They're like the charismatic megafauna of robotics. You love to look at them,
yeah.
But unfortunately, they've gotten bought and sold because the ultimate inventions, while fantastic, haven't proved to be practical. The ones that actually are practical robotics, the ones in the warehouses are actually pretty boring and sometimes kind of ugly. For most people, they're not as fun to look at. They don't make good YouTube videos if you're just moving around pallets in a warehouse. That's a discrepancy between what we see in robotics.
Oh, so funny. Okay, we're having fun here. Jeff Bezos.
I to my mother's great regret, I interviewed with Jeff Bezos, and I would have been badge number 72 at Amazon from the offer that he gave me. Yeah, he was a smart guy. He was super impressive. Even back when he gave me that offer, I'd like to say he's brilliant because he gave me the job offer. Me not so much for not accepting it. Hey, everybody in Silicon Valley has these stories.
Yeah.
I think that's mine.
Yeah. Okay. And one more we'll do. Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and Mitch Kapoor of Lotus. Those were the three people that I had in my high school locker door. Other people had celebrities, sports figures. Those were my three people.
Oh, so fun. Tesla Model S, Ferrari F50, 1968 Pontiac GTO. Oh,
really easy. The Tesla, absolutely. I think some of those other cars are fantastic in their own way, but I'm on the wait list for a new one of the electric cars. I won't say which, and it's just the future to me. They just look like the future, and in that way, they're just more beautiful. Those other cars have their place, and they're beautiful in their own way. But man, when I look at electric cars and I see the future, for me, that's what beauty is.
Okay, here's we'll see what you say. Malcolm Gladwell, Stephen Hawking, Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Wow, these are just fantastic people. I mean, all of them, they're amazing. You know, Neil deGrasse Tyson, I will just take because I think there is a big role to play with people like that, making science accessible to people. That's a big deal for people just to be able to trust science. And so I really admire what he does. He's the Carl Sagan of our time. And I deeply admire what he does. You know, Stephen Hawking. I mean, what you can't say. It's too bad that he didn't get a Nobel Prize. I don't know why. It's a travesty of justice. The guy was, you know, manifestly brilliant. Although, of course, I never met him.
And Malcolm Gladwell, he's just
he's amazing storyteller. You know, my wife says I have many skills in life. Storytelling is not among them.
Oh, I disagree. You're telling a lot of great stories just now.
That's very kind. That's very kind. You know, man, if I could be more like Malcolm Gladwell, wow, that guy. I could read him and Michael Lewis. I could read about them. I could read their stories about paper clips, for goodness sake. They're just ridiculous.
Yeah, two of my favorites as well. Well, Dr. Daimler, thank you so much for your time today. It's been fascinating and very interesting to get to know you a little better. And of course, get to know about your background and your Connexus AI. So I want to thank you from me, Karl Rahn at Captario, for spending some time with us today.
Thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun. I will look forward to it sometime, to visiting Gothenburg in Sweden.
That'd be great.
Good place.
That'd be great. Gothenburg is an interesting place. Come in the summer, for sure. Bring an umbrella just in case.
So I've heard.
But it's a beautiful city, and the mussels here. Local mussels that are quite good.
All right, on the list.
Thank you for watching Data, Pharma, and Fika. If you'd like to learn more about Connexus AI or Captario, check out the links below. And see you next time.